Greetings and welcome. I'm Steve Clemons, editor-at-large of The Hill. Thanks for joining us today for our program, Relief to Recovery. What's next for small business? An in-depth look at the state of small business. I also got to say, I like to say young business, micro business. Small business doesn't really capture it all. You know what I mean. We're going to focus on these businesses as owners attempt to recover from a once-in-a-lifetime pandemic. Maybe it's a once-in-a-lifetime pandemic. I'd like to thank our sponsor, Wells Fargo, for its support of today's event. The new year has brought with it a new administration, a new Congress, and if the right steps are taken, hopefully a new day for small businesses. In the past year, many business owners have learned to innovate, embrace new technologies, and new business models in order to stay afloat. Yet the uncertainty is far from over. We're still figuring out what normal even means in these times. We're going to take a look at entrepreneurs in a post-pandemic world. But at first, we're going to have to figure out how to move from COVID relief to making it a full recovery. To help us find out, we're going to be joined by a really great lineup of speakers, including members of Congress, as well as small business experts and owners from around the country. Before we get underway, a few housekeeping notes. You can tweet us at The Hill Events using the hashtag TheHillSmallBiz, B-I-Z. We're broadcasting live and we'll be taking your questions throughout the program. And as with any live stream, you could experience occasional trouble with the video. Refreshing the page, they say, will fix things for you. Good luck. My first guest is Congressman Blaine Luetkemeyer, the new ranking member of the House Small Business Committee. He's from Missouri, a great state. He's also a member of the Financial Services Committee and has made it a top priority of his to ensure access to PPP for small business owners. Representative Luetkemeyer, I have to start saying I love your Twitter handle. You have a great last name, but Rep. Blaine is much easier on all of us in the number of spaces. So you're already innovating there. But let me ask you, now as you come into your new role as ranking member of the Small Business Committee, what's on your dashboard? What do you think we need to get right? What's the balance and equity between the federal government helping a little and helping too much?
Well, I think first we need to make sure the PPP program that was rolled out with the bill at the end of December is rolled out successfully. So far, it looks pretty good. We've got roughly 400,000 loans that have already been out. We've got about $35 billion out the door, average size loan about $87,000. So it's targeted roughly to where it needs to be. I think the first rollout was successful. We basically saved about 50 million jobs. And I think so our first job on the committee should be to make sure that this is successful and make sure that money goes to the places it needs to go, because it's a pretty targeted program, which I think is very good. I think after that, we just need to work with the administration to make sure we don't overregulate or raise taxes too much. We showed in the first 3 years of the Trump administration until the pandemic hit that lower taxes, lower regulations were very helpful to get entrepreneurs engaged, for them to be willing to take the risks it takes to start a new business and continue to grow that business. Steve, I'm sure you're aware that basically 70% of all the new jobs in this country are created by small businesses, and they employ roughly about half the people in this country. So they're a huge driver of our economy. And they're the entrepreneurs, the ones who innovate, take risks, and we need to make the environment as best we can for them to do that. And I want to work with the administration to make sure that this continues. I think we've got the template here on how this can be successful, and I'm looking forward to the work here in this coming year.
Well, thank you. Congressman, I was looking at your tweets, and you did have one that I find interesting. You sort of referred to it, but you said you're talking to your constituents. You're saying underserved small businesses that didn't receive a first draw from PPP in 2020 can now apply. I guess I'm interested in this question of where the lines hit in terms of small businesses and reaching out. When I talked to your predecessor, Steve Chabot, about this, he said, look, there are some companies that have they had a level of employees and we didn't hit them, didn't touch them. Is that what you're talking about, underserved businesses? And is that have you gone deeper into what constitutes a small business that can get support?
Yeah, I think last time we drew the line at 500 employees. This time we drew the line at 300 employees to make it more targeted to the smaller businesses yet. There was some concern by some people that the bigger small businesses shouldn't have received the aid, whenever some of them, in some situations, were struggling just as much as the mom and pop shops. But you got small manufacturers that, for one reason or another, were struggling. So I think it continues. This program has got a lot of the improvements in it. And I think we need to continue to watch it and see if we need to, again, tweak the program as we go. I know that during the initial PPP rollout, Secretary of the Treasury Mnuchin, as well as the SBA director, were very responsive in trying to get new information out and answer the frequently asked questions for folks. I'm satisfied that will happen again with Chair Yellen. Secretary Yellen, I've worked with her before. She's a great lady. I think that we can find some common ground there to be helpful on the PPP program. And our new SBA folks are continuing to work very hard to get this rolled out. And so far, we've actually had minimal problems compared to what we had last time. Not that there haven't been some glitches, but so far it's been very successful. And the few things that have been popped up, I think we're going to be able to get those questions answered pretty quickly.
This may be an unfair question because I don't know where your jurisdiction ends and others start, but I had the pleasure of interviewing Representative McHenry yesterday, who's on the Financial Services Committee in ranking. We talked a little bit about sort of reputational scoring of not only people, but of businesses. And he says, there is a lot that we can do to sort of help open the spigots, if you will, in terms of getting small businesses more capital and more financing opportunities. And he was very, very direct. And he says, we haven't even scratched the surface on the kinds of things that we can do to help create a more level playing field and more opportunities on that. Do you work at all with him? Are you looking forward to working with the kind of finance side of capital as opposed to just the regulatory side of the small business ecosystem?
Yeah, I also sit on the Financial Services Committee, and I'm the ranking member on the Financial Institutions Subcommittee, which oversees all the banks and credit unions, mortgage bankers, and all the regulators. So I deal with the FDIC, Federal Reserve, CFPB, all those folks on a regular basis. So yeah, I work with Patrick. We're deeply involved in trying to make sure that these businesses have access to capital. On the Small Business Committee, where I chair now, the ranker on it now, yes, that's going to be very important. Continue to have access to capital, affordable capital. We want to make sure we keep interest rates low, and we have these programs that were rolled out in the initial PPP program are funded, and they will continue to be rolled out, supported. I realize that Secretary Mnuchin actually rolled back a few of these programs that were not being utilized very much and used those dollars in to be able to help fund the new PPP program. So I think, we just need to work with the administration. And I think, Chairman McHenry, or Ranking Member McHenry, has done a good job of being able to work with the different entities to make sure that access to capital is there, to shore up the markets so that there is plenty of liquidity in the markets, plenty of liquidity in the financial services folks, as well as the industries that buy and sell securities. There was a problem last spring, quite frankly, with regards to municipal bonds and inability of them to be traded, and so there were the lack of revenues coming in undercut those markets, and so we did some things to underpin those markets, to shore them up, to be able to allow the state and local governments to continue to buy and sell and fund themselves and the liquidity they needed. So yes, there's a lot of it's a pretty big picture that you have to look at when you talk about access to capital. It's pretty involved, but I think Mr. McHenry's done a great job of that, and we want to continue to work on the Small Business Committee with the SBA to provide those kind of programs as well, to have the small business folks have access to the kind of capital they need to, number one, continue to exist, and number two, to be able to allow those entrepreneurs to get into the small businesses and help create those jobs that are going to actually grow our economy and get us out of this mess.
Congressman, I'm going to ask you, what your gut feeling is. Do you think we're through the worst of the COVID impacts? COVID really slaughtered so many small businesses in this country, and I think the level of devastation that has hit that community is something hard to get our heads wrapped around. I do a lot of this kind of interviews with people around the nation, and I still think we're going to be dealing with this for a very long time. But that's my view. But do you feel like we're through the worst of it? What do your constituents feel? What do small businesses on your street down the street think about the situation, and what does their gut tell them? What does your gut tell you?
That's a great question, Steve. I think we probably they got the worst behind us, but you're right. I agree with you. We're not out of the woods yet. But I want to point out a couple things here. My state of Missouri, we took the lockdown off in mid-May, and as a result, our 2020 revenues for the state of Missouri were actually up 5.5%. Unemployment rate today is 4.4%. with 200,000 jobs sitting there waiting for people to fill them. Now, over the last week or so here, I've seen several states, Michigan, Illinois, and California, that have actually stopped some of their lockdowns as well. Washington, D.C. mayor has stopped some of their lockdowns. As these lockdowns roll off, I think you'll see the kind of economic activity that we saw here in Missouri, where the businesses jump right back in. The people are anxious to get out and do the things they do. I can tell you, I live very close to Lake of the Ozarks, just one of the prime recreational areas in the Midwest. It actually doubled the visitation this past year over last year, which was the second best year they ever had in history. So the people are ready to get out. They've got the money to spend. The businesses just have to be open to accept their business. And I think as we see these lockdowns roll off as a result of the vaccinations of people being more widespread and people being more comfortable with going out, I think you'll see our economy pick up quite quickly. Right now, as you know, the taxes are low. We've taken the regs off, and you saw the growth that occurred the first 3 years of the Trump administration. That can continue after we get this COVID problem behind us if we don't strangle it with new rules and regulations and higher taxes.
I've got a question from the audience, but I want to ask you very briefly, slip one more in here. President Biden has come in and done an enormous number of executive orders very quickly. A lot of them simply reverse what President Trump had put into place with executive orders. Some of them deal with regulatory fronts on environmental issues. Do you think we're still in the terrain that the message you're sending is, hey, don't get in and re-regulate, don't get in and undo whatever? Has the Biden administration still on the side of the line where that vision you're suggesting can still work? Or do you think they have already, by removing some of the executive orders that Trump had in place, already created problems?
Well, I think they've already created problems from the standpoint of the number of jobs that they're costing with, for instance, just the permitting of the Keystone Pipeline, stopping the construction of the border wall. I mean, those are real jobs, real people who have real families to support. They're necessary construction projects that we have committed to, and now to stop in midstream is going to cost billions and billions of dollars. That is frustrating to me to see that. If you want to tinker around with the economy, let's talk about rules and regulations that can make a difference someplace, but don't go and stop existing projects. If you want to talk about doing a climate agenda, which the president seems hell-bent on doing, that's fine. Let's talk about it, but let's don't stop existing projects and cost people jobs and states revenue. This is not the way that you want to try and get the economy up and running and build support for your programs. I'm very disappointed in that. I think hope it's not a precursor of things to come with regards to the administration. But I served for the 8 years that Mr. Biden was vice president. The Obama administration was, quite frankly, awful when it came to rules and regulations. They just strangled our economy. And you look at the last 3 years of their administration, the GDP went down, 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 all 3 years. It tells you that the economic policies they put in place with higher taxes and more regulation were not working, and we're strangling our economy and sending it back into a recession.
Right.
If that happens again, we're going to be in trouble. I'm hopeful that he does not do that, and that people will allow him to continue some of the programs that were put together over the past 3 years. The PPP program here is a great safety net for our small businesses. We need to continue to support that and go along with it. But we'll have to see. I'm willing to work with the president, whatever he wants to do to make this a successful economy and keep our people employed and our businesses going at full steam, because they can drive this economy. They've shown that. Steve, we had 1.2 million more jobs than we had people to fill them right before the pandemic hit. That is a measure of success that has never been there in our history of our country. I had a long discussion with Chairman Powell about this one day. And I said, Chairman Powell, your models are off. You realize that, don't you? And he was scratching his head. I said, you've never had a situation where you've had this many jobs out there with people unable to fill them that's a variable you've never put in your models before. Have you? And he admitted that he hadn't. So therefore, the economic models that are out there, if they don't put this sort of variable in there, it's very difficult to project down the road. And so I'm hopeful we can get back to that. I'm excited about the opportunities with this. With the pandemic behind us, I think we've got great things ahead of us. But obviously, you're right. We have a few months here where we've got to batten down the hatches and make sure we get our population vaccinated and safely taken care of.
Well, Congressman, I'm sure your communications team is listening to this right now. I invite you to write that op-ed about what's missing in the variables for the Hill. I think it'd be a great door to open and have that discussion. We have a question from the audience from you, from John. John?
Hello, my name is John Berg. I'm Vice President with Miller Windhold Capital Strategies in Fairfax, Virginia. And my question is, may you please discuss the need for the next White House conference on small business?
Well, maybe that should go to the White House, but what do you think about White House conference on small business?
Yeah, I've attended some of those in the past, and they're really good because what you do is it's a grassroots effort. You get people who are in the trenches. They're the small business people and the lenders who help, and all of the people who deal with them. And as a result, you get a lot of great input. You know, as policymakers, we sometimes think that we know the answers to these problems when we really don't. If you don't listen to the people who are in the trenches every day, who these rules and regulations and taxes affect, you don't really understand the problem and the solutions to those problems. Right. I always tell people who come to my office, I say, don't bring me your problem, bring me your solutions. You know, I can throw a solution at a problem, but if I don't know the intricacies of your industry, the unintended consequences of my solution, I could do more harm than good. So work with me with your solutions to how we can do this. And these White House conferences on small business are great venues for those sorts of discussions to take place. I'm very supportive of those. That's a great idea.
Well, thank you. Well, Representative Blaine Luetkemeyer, thank you so much for joining us and for your candid thoughts, and I hope you'll come back. Thanks so much for joining us and starting our program on small business today.
Thank you so much, and I'm glad that you gave my staff some homework to do there. We appreciate that.
Okay, great. Thank you. Ron Busby is the president and CEO of the U.S. Black Chambers, where he advocates for the economic empowerment of the black community. He's a former business owner himself. He's a very successful former business owner. And so this is a topic he knows well. Ron, it's great to see you. Thanks so much for joining us. You know, as we talk about this, and right now we're in a time where the tensions in the nation, inequality, COVID, the economic stress that I think is still very much out there, but also the divides about opportunity and race are out there. And so when we think about this, and I try every single time when we're discussing business, is to sort of what do we need to dismantle from our past to get the future right? And how, and you know, as you're dealing with, you know, businesses, black businesses, the Black Chamber, what do you need to help the constituency you're responding to succeed?
Great question, and I appreciate the dialogue as well as the opportunity to discuss the concerns as well as the solutions, as was discussed before, for Black-owned businesses. And I say that because so often we have the title of diversity and inclusion, minority programs. What we have seen and heard from our members across the country is intentionality. We need to see and hear and read the words Black and or African American in the solutions. We have seen, even in the previous legislation, the words Black or African American never listed there. The words minority and underserved were there, but it did not specify the needs of Black-owned businesses. Our community was hit the hardest. 46,000 African Americans lost their lives due to COVID. We lost 441,000 businesses due to COVID. We also lost many of the businesses in our communities that had employees as well as customers and contracts that were lost. What we're looking for going forward is a couple of things. Transparency. When we looked at where payroll protection plan and other of the stimulus dollars were going, they didn't hit the Black community. And our concern is that when we leave it as a broad brush of how we're going to address minority communities, many times Black communities get left out of that equation. So for us, there needs to be accountability. We know that, and I'm glad to see that Wells Fargo is sponsoring this conversation. We want to make sure that not just the CDFIs have access to the businesses that need that relationship, but many of our businesses continue and will, even after this, bank with larger banks. They'll continue to bank with the Bay of A's and the Wells Fargos. So we want to make sure that they have accountability to ensure that businesses have access to the funds, but most importantly, Black-owned businesses have access to the funds that they need. 47% of the businesses that still remain in existence for Black businesses are saying that if they don't get funding, additional funding in the next 60 days, they too are looking at having to close their doors. And then next, as those businesses have gone out of business, we're talking a lot about a payroll protection plan that is geared towards businesses that have employees. Black businesses own and operate 2.6 million Black-owned businesses across the country. But of the 2.6 million, 2.5 million have no employees. As we say, they're not mom and pops, they're mom or pops. And so when you create a program that is there to ensure that the employee is taken care of and not the employer, you leave the Black business community totally out of the loop. And so we've got to ensure that it's based on need and not based on employee base, because many of our firms do have contractors, 1099, family members, or cash and carry type businesses that were not allowed to participate in the stimulus package, and many of our businesses suffer, and we want to make sure that going forward, that is not going to be a barrier as well.
Ron, that's very powerful, and I know you are right about the employees. Even when I was talking to the congressman a moment ago, about the level of, the employee size, he was saying, well, we went, from 500 employees the minimum to 300. I'm like, going, well, what about 10? What about 2? What about, as you said, what about 1? Because in a gig economy where you've got sort of fluid opportunities and people chasing it, or a lot of people have put together multiple gig jobs, to kind of hold it together. And many of them are businesses. I interviewed Ahmad Bhutani, the CEO of GoDaddy, and, looking at micro ventures that people are, what we would call side hustles that become businesses. Yeah. Some of them grow, but they are small. And I guess I just sort of feel like we don't talk about that enough. Those are legitimate businesses. They're organized under the IRS as businesses. Are you finding any because I look at this as a marketing problem, a marketing challenge, as well as a conceptual one. Are you finding any allies as you talk about this in that way? Because I find it very compelling. I'm with you. But who are the other allies you've moved?
Well, some of our corporate partners have really stepped up and heard our cry. I think the Black community really suffered from a three-prong or a trifecta. It was the virus itself. And again, we lost 46,000 Black lives. It was the stimulus package where we lost 400 and almost 50,000 Black-owned businesses. And then we saw the murder of George Floyd. And when you put all of those together, our community has suffered. But at the same time, many of our corporate partners stepped up. There's numbers around the $66 billion or $6 billion commitment made. But again, transparency and accountability. So many of the corporations have stepped up and said, yes, how can they support? How can they make sure that we don't lose those Black-owned businesses? But we've got to make sure that we can actually find out where those dollars are going. We know that in America, between 1950 and 2020, we've saw very little, if any, decrease in the wealth gap between white families and Black families. And when that continues to happen, as it was discussed before, this is not going to be the last pandemic or scare. And so for us, we've got to make sure that we get this one right. We're looking at asking for an additional stimulus package in the very near future during the first quarter. And we're asking for a 3% set aside just for Black-owned businesses, roughly a $10 billion number of the $650 billion. But we have demonstrated that we could save nearly 500,000 jobs with that kind of support. And so many of our corporations are hearing our cry, are stepping up. And so our partners have really been there to kind of fill in the gap between where the federal government had not had the opportunity to support many of the micro businesses and Black-owned businesses particularly.
Ron, I'm going to look forward to having you back many more times and talking with you, because you're doing. A friend of mine is the president of the U.S. Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, and you've raised a very interesting question, which I think is a delicate and fragile one, but I'm just going to ask you, are there times where the so-called Black and brown community can be partnered and work together as opposed to just the times you've said, hey, we also need to see, Black businesses written into this? I mean, are there times you work together and times when you walk alone?
Oh, very much so. The U.S. Hispanic Chamber, the U.S. Pan-Asian Chamber, the U.S. Gay and Lesbian Chamber, as well as the U.S. Black Chamber, we all work together. And the great thing about it is we all have similarity concerns. So often, though, they try to pin us against each other. And we've come together over the last few years and said many of our concerns are similar. This month, it may be a Black issue. Last month, it may have been a Hispanic issue. But when we do know that when we come together collectively, our voices, our concerns are amplified, and we have an opportunity to get more listeners and get more accomplished. What I don't want America to really understand, or what I want America to understand is there's no Black and brown issue. There are Black issues and there are brown issues. And we need to make sure that we're intentional. I'm not trying to take anything away from the Hispanic community or any other communities. But when we look at who had the biggest loss, the Black community suffered at 41%, almost twice the rate of any other ethnic community. And so at this point in time, I'm speaking on behalf of our businesses saying we need twice the support of any other ethnic group. But yes, we come together. I'm very pleased to partner with many of our ethnic chambers and other nonprofit organizations around the country, because as we all grow together, we all do better. The one thing that all of our businesses say is we're looking for additional customers. And so when the Hispanic community has additional customers, they continue to shop and support Black-owned businesses as well.
Well, Ron Busby, President and CEO of U.S. Black Chambers, is a pleasure. I hope you'll come back. I really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Now it's time for the sponsor perspective portion of the program and a message from the sponsor of today's event, Wells Fargo. Please welcome Maurice Jones, President and CEO, Local Initiative Support Corporation, and Mary Mack, CEO of the Wells Fargo Consumer and Small Business Banking.
Thank you, and we are delighted to be here. Maurice, let's jump right into it because there's a lot to talk about, particularly what you're doing at LISC. So you guys have been doing a fantastic job through the pandemic, helping small businesses survive and position themselves to thrive as we come out of this. So talk about that. What are you seeing? What's happening? What's happening in the small business community? What does 2021 look like? Would love to hear your perspective.
Absolutely. Yeah. You know, we have spent the bulk, or I should say we spent the bulk of 2020 doing a couple of things as it relates to small businesses. First, providing relief grants so that small businesses could fight this existential threat that has really confronted them with COVID and with the pandemic and contraction in the economy. And so we actually distributed over $200 million to small businesses in the form of grants last year. And we particularly focused on small businesses led by people of color, small businesses led by women, small businesses working in low wealth communities, and small businesses working in rural communities. That's where we focus. Those were the small businesses that for us were amongst the hardest hit and were the ones who really needed the relief from groups like CDFIs. The other thing that we focused on was trying to invest in the ecosystem surrounding those small businesses, people who could, organizations who could help those small businesses with technical issues or IT issues or marketing issues, or what do you do now that you need to have a mobile play, if you will. I think what we're seeing for 2021 is a fair amount of continuation as long as this pandemic is still so prevalent, which it is. So we think we're going to have to continue to provide grants so that these small businesses can remain open, so that they can remain vital in the communities that they're serving. We also think we're going to have to continue to focus on the demographics that I outlined. And we really know that we're going to have to focus on the rebuild, the repositioning of these businesses. For example, every small business now will need to have an e-commerce play, right? Yeah, either refining, enhancing what they already have, or getting one in place. Well, we want to be helpful with technical assistance and with funds to help those small businesses develop or refine these e-commerce plays. So it's really important for us to be able to continue to focus on those kinds of things in 2021 as well.
So that's really interesting and resonates, right? As a consumer, as well as somebody supporting small businesses. But talk about that. What does Thrive look like? What does the long term look like? Because a year in, I think everything has changed. Yeah. So what's the perspective of a small business for the long term?
Yeah, let me give you a couple of examples. I should have paused and just commended you all because the funds that you've been putting out into the marketplace for small businesses are funds that we're using. Your Open for Business piece are funds that we have been using in a huge way to help small businesses. Let me give you an example. We provided a grant to a tailoring business in DC. The gentleman's name is J.C. Lofton Tailors in Washington, D.C. This business was started in 1939 by his grandfather, African-American. It was one of the first African-American tailoring businesses in schools. And what he has had to do is he has had to be able to continue to pay his bills as his demand has gone down. What we're going to have to be able to do with a business like that, to your point moving forward, is to really help him reposition the entire business for a different economic context moving forward in the tailoring space, right? He has for a long time relied on politicians and celebrities and others who were going out to actually get their garments, their clothing tailored. Well, now he's got to figure out how to reposition his actual business for the longer term, how to actually go. He will have to be more mobile than he was prior to that. So we will have to help him reposition and rebrand and really engage in a new strategy for the longer term that is post the pandemic, that is post the recession. Those are the kinds of things that we want to use capital and technical assistance for. I'll give you another example. We also, with your help, invested in a camp in rural Illinois, about 100 miles outside of Chicago. Camp Kupogani, I believe is the way you pronounce it. This camp is rare or I should say unique in the following way. The owners are an African-American husband and wife team. They usually take in about 160 students over the summers for a camp. They're sleepover camps. Well, guess what? In 2020, that business went completely to zero, right? We needed to help them stay open and position themselves for 2021 and beyond. And so with your help, we were able to give them a grant and a really, really low interest loan. Moving forward, they will have to figure out how to do this camp that they have been doing for years now, a decade, I believe, or more, in a setting where you probably will have to have a hybrid model, a model that is both in person and a model that is both virtual. And so you really are talking about using assistance to help companies reposition, remake, literally evolve into a business for a different climate, if that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense. It's a whole business model in the midst of everything else that they are doing and trying to keep their own employees employed and working, and those families supported. They're having to really rethink their business model, building on a brand and a history, but bring it forward into a very different environment.
Absolutely.
Fantastic.
Let me ask you, because I know you've been on the front lines of small business investment as well. I thank you for that. What are you seeing, and what do you see yourself going in the future?
So it's really interesting. Literally, as we tape this, we are getting ready for the launch, which launched for the MDIs and other small institutions this week, and will launch next week as we tape this for the second round of the Paycheck Protection Program, which has been incredibly valuable for a number of our small business customers. In the first round, we did over 194,000, $10.5 billion, but we skewed to the smallest and most fragile businesses. That was what we knew was really important. That's who we support in our marketplaces. And so like 84% of our loans were to businesses with 10 or fewer employees, and 2 in 5 were to low to moderate income or minority census tract community, businesses in those communities. So we tried very hard to focus on those communities. And to your point, the really exponential impact that this has had on particularly diverse businesses. But we knew we needed to do more. So we then turned around and took the fees, the gross fees that accrued from that work in the PPP, the first round of PPP, and started the Open for Business Fund that you referenced, so that we could then put that money back, those fees back into the hands of CDFIs, who could then leverage it. In turn, $250 million of the $400 million that we put back in turned into $1 billion with the way your business model works. So again, as we take this, we're preparing for PPP round 2, and our intent there is to, again, support those smallest and most fragile businesses who need our help and support the most, and then turn around and put substantial dollars back into the recovery, the short and long-term recovery that you talk about of these small businesses, so that, I think it's fairly easy for me to see those total funds going back in of, over $500 million that we can then reinvest with folks like you to help with the short and long-term recovery. So it has been an opportunity for financial institutions like Wells Fargo to lean in and be a difference maker in the health of small business. So we're delighted to partner with you guys. You guys are doing fantastic work all over the country, and it's been a great partnership that we hope to grow over time. So thank you.
We're grateful for your partnership. Thank you.
Great. Thanks for being here. It's good to be with you today.
You too. You too. All the best.
Great discussion, and I love the focus on the DC business, so thank you for that, and thanks for supporting today's program. For our panel today, we're going to be speaking to small business owners and advocates from around the country. William Myers is Vice President of Business Development at Denison Development Alliance in Denison, Texas. His e-commerce accelerator incentive grant program has been helping spur economic development in the state, and you can read about it in part in The Hill, which I'll get into in a moment. Midgie Moore is the Owner and Chief Eating Officer, that's such a cool title, of Juneau Food Tours and Taste Alaska. She developed a subscription box service, Taste Alaska. Right after this, I'm going to go order one, but as a response to the pandemic, which crushed the tourism industry. And last but not least, we have Joanna Segoviano, a millennial businesswoman and owner of Viano, a home staging company based in California. My friends watch a lot of TV. I never get a chance, but they're obsessed with home stagers. It's really great to have all of you on. William, I want to just start with you. I'm going to get to our great entrepreneurs in a moment. But because I got a lot of the ideas that we have for this from my friend Aman Bhutani. And Aman happens to be CEO of a firm called GoDaddy, which is the largest internet registrar, but they have a whole lot of suites of things. And he's the one who educated me about ventures and micro businesses. And don't get lost in just the nomenclature about so-called small businesses. They come in a lot of varieties. But he talked about you, and he talked about what you folks have done in incubating these businesses. So I'd love you to give just a snapshot of what you've achieved in Denison and how a partnership between, what the local officials are doing and, very entrepreneurial, creative people in a time of crisis is actually moving the needle.
Yes, sir. It's a pleasure to be here, Steve. Early on, the first month of COVID, we were reeling, trying to figure out how we could be of value and service to our local businesses that were reeling. And we started doing research, and actually this is a connection of Main Street organization with local businesses and the Economic Development Corporation. And all that communication led to the GoDaddy Venture Forward information regarding the impact that highly active ventures have on a community and the increase in median income. We took that information to the mayor, and the mayor said, make that happen. And so we created an e-commerce accelerator grant. It's not ironic that the first 10 that applied were all downtown because they were part of our Main Street program, and they were informed, they were engaged. They plugged in. Some of them got together and even filled out the application together, and we were off and running.
Well, it's a fascinating story, and I should tell people if you're interested, you can go to GoDaddy.com/venture forward and read about some of this. And Denison is also appears in the pages of The Hill and what it's done. But let me jump to Midgie because I'm hungry. I'm hungry by what you've done. But I want to give people a sense. I'm laughing and I'm so happy that you're well. I know a lot of people have not done well, but I just want to give people a sense of the crushing reality you faced when COVID shut down tourism to Juneau, Alaska.
Well, I tell you, it's been pretty dramatic. It's been almost a year. This time last year, I was looking at a 200% increase in sales over 2019. I was going to pay off all my debt and actually bring on full-time employees instead of seasonal employees. And that all came to a screeching halt in mid-March. And it wasn't just me, it was the entire state and anybody who works in tourism. But Alaska tourism is very important to us, and specifically in Juneau, where I live, because we're a major cruise ship port. And when the cruise lines could no longer come here because of the pandemic, we lost millions, hundreds of millions of dollars in our economy, and as well as the tax base for our city. And so now everybody is struggling to figure out what to do. So
tell us how you turned the corner.
So what I did. To be perfectly honest, I love being an entrepreneur. I was born to be an entrepreneur. And the thing that I did not want was to have to go work for the state or the city or a government job. I wanted to create jobs. I wanted to create a positive impact on my economy. And so what I did was dust off an idea I had from a few years ago to create a food tour in a box. And in that box, it was going to be items that I could gather from some of my food tour partners, and we could ship it to people as like a Christmas present. Oh, we bought you a cruise, and then it's a tangible good to unwrap. Well, I looked beyond that, and I realized there's all these people. We were expecting 1.4 or 5 million people to come to Juneau in 5 months, and none of them were coming. Well, there's a market there, and I was like, why don't I send Alaska to you? So our motto became, if you can't come to us, we'll come to you. And what I did was I curated boxes from products all over the state, made in Alaska products, and we ship Alaska to you. And in the boxes are food products. There's always an art piece or a cultural piece. And then we have travel and trip planning information. We have the Travel Alaska guide. Travel Juneau has been very gracious to provide their guides. We had Explore Fairbanks. And so we get them from all over the state so that people can still plan those trips, and they're keeping Alaska in the forefront of their minds as they're getting ready to hopefully travel again. We know they're going to come back. It's just a matter of when. And I want them to be ready. But while they're looking at all of this great imagery of things they can see and do, they're noshing on this amazing Alaska-made food.
Well, it's fascinating. Let me jump to Joanna and Homestay. And I should say I love Juneau. I've been there. It's sort of the most unlikely place, but we can get into that later. But Joanna, you're in real estate, and I know, and I should tell everyone that Midgie did not get PPP loan. She got something called an economic injury disaster loan. So part of it, I'm interested is, how do you survive in this time? Are banks and financial institutions and other players leaning in to try to help where they can? And I guess when you made your pivot, tell us about your pivot, Joanna.
Yes, absolutely. I like to call myself the queen of grants. I love just setting time aside and applying for grants, applying for the PPP loan. I was one of the small business owners that was a recipient of a couple of them. I want to say it was a total of 4 or 5 grants, and that helped me out so much. At the beginning, when COVID happened, I had employee shortage because either my employees were getting COVID, their family members were getting COVID, or in one case, my key employee's father passed away. And that was really hard on our company because she is the lead stager, the one that transforms all these beautiful homes. I had to step in, train a new employee. I had to train myself and start decorating houses. And I'm so grateful for these grants because they helped me during that transition. It helped me pay for my warehouse lease, payroll, insurance, and just set expenses that I had every month. And that's why I became the queen of applying for grants. Just like when I was in college, I would apply for scholarships. I started applying for grants, and it's just a habit now. I have it in my calendar to make sure I set some time apart to look for grants and share my story because I have a beautiful business. In 2019, we staged about 127 homes. That's about 17 a month. So it's a thriving business. We were hoping to keep growing in 2020, and we did in different ways. We added additional sources of income. But I would definitely say that those grants and pivoting and increasing our marketing efforts definitely helped us a lot. So,
well, why don't you tell us real quickly what Viano does so that we can not only know that you're a great grant seeker, but give people a little bit of an idea of the genius of your business.
Of course. Viano Decor is a home staging company. We specialize in decorating vacant homes for sale in the Los Angeles area. What we do is we show up to a beautiful vacant home, we take a look, we make some notes, and we bring in our furniture, we bring in our decor. My background is my home, but it gives you an idea of how we decorate houses and we make them look so beautiful. And the whole intention is to influence a buyer to make an offer so the home can sell for more money and in less time. So wow. Viano Decor transforms places. It changes the way you look at space by adding furniture and decor.
God, I don't want to sell my house, but you're so enthusiastic that maybe I should. I don't know. But let me ask you all real quick. We have a couple of questions that have come in, and they're, Katura Walker, and this would be, Joanna, right up your alley. It says, for small business owners, do you have any suggestions on writing grants? I'd love to get your quick take on that. And Glenn Osnes, of owner of Bristol Grove, says, what can be done for small service business that doesn't qualify for PP loans? Are there things out there? So let me ask you to respond to Katura real quick, Joanna, and then ask our other two, because they may not be in that arena, what they might suggest in terms of pivots. But what is your advice on writing for a grant?
You know what? I consider myself a great storyteller. I think that whoever's reading our essays or our applications, on the other hand, they want to see someone who has a big heart, who is genuine. And I put on there, I'm a small business owner. I have a big dream to be the #1 staging company. Please believe in me. Please help me. And I use those words. And I think they can feel my energy. I jump through those words, through those letters, through those applications. So what I would do is start with the draft. Most grants ask the same questions. Why are you applying for this grant? Why do you think you deserve it? Tell us a little bit more about your challenges. And they don't only want to see your challenges, but your efforts and your actions that you're taking to go around those challenges. So I would say, just put a draft together and speak from the heart. Someone on the other side is reading those applications, and they're going to listen to you if you speak from your heart and you're genuine and you really want it. And law of attraction, just think about it, visualize it, go around chanting, I'm going to get the grant, I'm going to get the grant. So being positive helps too.
That's great. William, what's your counsel?
Well, I would suggest being prepared. Do your business plan, have it updated. Build your network of banker, CPA, accountant, all of your different consultants, your legal. And a lot of people didn't know how to respond to PPP and the EIDL when it first came out. And those that were able to respond quickest were those that had their accounting in order, had their lender that they could call up and ask, do I qualify? What do I qualify? So don't just do that for an emergency. Be prepared for every day in your business and lean on other people, lean on your chamber, lean on your accountant. The accountant is so important. And you just heard that Mr. Jones mentioned e-commerce. Lean on your social media and e-commerce consultant to help you get that built. You cannot do it all alone and be excellent at everything. Focus on what you're terrific at and use professionals for the other services.
And real quick before I jump to Midgie, William, I hope I don't have this wrong, but when I last read about the incubator you folks set up, you had a wave of companies, and then now you have another wave of companies that have been involved. I don't remember the numbers, but for a relatively small community, it was really, really impressive. So one, am I right? And then two, are you doing show and tell? Because I think the success of what you've done is something, I wonder, can others replicate that in other parts of the country?
We actually have it all posted online on denisontx.org/e-commerce. They can look at our applications and our guidelines and our, at the beginning, we were just trying to figure out what was needed. We called these businesses, how can we help you? And we built it around that, numerous hours and conversations. But it's just yes, it can be duplicated. It can be replicated. We had 10 in the first wave, 6 in the second wave. We probably have another 10 out there right now working on grants to submit for this fiscal year. We're thrilled about it. And we know that every highly active venture that we add in Denison helps increase our median income in the community. And it just gives you that, it's real. Not only is this business being successful, but the entire community is being successful. And it's just an exciting opportunity to see that in reality.
Thank you for that. Midgie, I know you didn't get a PPP loan. You got a different kind of loan. But as you kind of look at that terrain and responding to the questions we had, what's the counsel you would give? And I know I've been reading, I'm going to go to Juneau and we're going to meet up. I hope you'll let me in the town. But I know that you're
Absolutely, I'll feed you.
Yeah, you're president of the Downtown Business Association. So you're not only doing your own thing, but you're actually helping to provide counsel for others. So, what are the stories, as you hear these same things? Hey, what if I don't qualify for a PPP? Are there options? Or when you're actually writing grants, what are some of the tips that you give people?
So one of the things I do tell people is that don't be afraid to apply. The worst they can say is no. So apply for everything. But I will echo William, have your information ready, get your, get with your CPA. One of the things that my husband is also in tourism. He owns a charter boat company. We have a CPA and we made our CPA get our 2019 stuff in order right away because normally we take a little time, but we were like, we cannot afford to wait because everybody wanted to know what did we make in 2019 because we are not making that in 2020 and they want to see the difference. And so as president of our Downtown Business Association, one of the very first things we did was coordinate webinars and information opportunities to get that information out to all of our members in the association, all the small businesses, so that they could start applying. When the EIDL first came out, it was a little complicated. The SBA website I don't think they really realized that they would get millions and millions of applications in a day. And so the site crashed, but they fixed it and then they made it much easier to apply. And so in the second wave, more people were able to get funding. That loan has definitely helped me significantly because I usually feed thousands of people on my tours during the summer. In 2020, I fed 24 people as guests on my tours. And the boxes made the big difference. That also helped me pivot and create an entire new revenue stream that is now year round, which is much, really exciting and much more encouraging.
I was going to ask you that just as we close up, and I love this conversation. I always love people doing real things. And we got Senator Ben Cardin in the wings. He's actually my senator. I have home in Chestertown, Maryland, I talk to a lot of small business owners and, folks that are, farming oysters, and they're doing what you're doing. They're now sending their oysters from Orchard Point Oysters, all over the country in cold storage, which they weren't doing before. So my question, just real quick, to our two business divas, if I may say that, divas in my world is a very good thing. But I guess my question to you really fast is,
I am a diva.
when we go back to so-called normal, are you still going to continue to do the things you've learned to do? Just real fast, Midgie?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've always been looking for a year-round revenue stream, but I've since opened up a retail store. It will be a stop on my tours when I'm able to resume tours. I'll be able to bring in employees instead of being tour guides, or as we call them, culinary hosts. They will be working in the store with me. They help me in the fulfillment center, packing and sending the boxes. So yes, I will absolutely keep doing what I'm doing, because I've been able to help businesses all across the state get some of their products off the shelves and in customer hands. And that's what I wanted to do.
Well, it's great. Joanna, let me get you. Will you continue to kind of do the things you're doing that you've learned during the COVID period?
Absolutely. One of the different things that we're doing now is, instead of just staging vacant homes for sale, we're now staging homes for homeowners.
Right.
We're staging homes for restaurants, dentistries, dental offices. I just helped my chiropractor revamp her office. It looks amazing. So we are definitely now expanding our services to other small businesses, restaurants, homeowners, and it's just something we're going to carry on past.
I don't know, maybe the Denison Development Alliance office needs your help.
Yes. Yes.
Well, William, any quick last thoughts, final thoughts on, are we going to ever go back to an analog world that makes sense, or are you going to continue in this line of e-commerce because of all the doors it has opened?
We're definitely going back, continue with e-commerce. I want to mention, we've got to expand broadband access. You say you can do e-commerce from anywhere, but if you don't have broadband, it's difficult. The National Association of Counties has a broadband task force looking at this across the country. Communities can go to connectednation.org and see what their local broadband access is. Go check that out and call your elected officials and let them know if you're having problems with low speeds. It's amazing who is dealing with 10 megs per second still.
Wow.
And we're fortunate in Denison, but it's something that definitely needs to be taken care of. And K through 12 education. North Carolina has some great programs. I'm in Texas. I'm jealous. I wish we had some of the programs North Carolina has focusing on K through 12 high-tech digital education.
Well, listen, this has been, I should never say this because, I love all my children equally, but I love this panel. William Myers of the Denison Development Alliance, Midgie Moore of Juneau Food Tours and Taste Alaska, and Joanna Segoviano, owner of Ayano. Thank you all so much for sharing your stories with us.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. My final guest today is Senator Ben Cardin of Maryland. And I just mentioned Chestertown, which is in Maryland, so he's my senator. He's the incoming chair of the Senate Small Business and Entrepreneurship Committee, where he's advocated for increasing access to capital, which we've discussed so much today on today's program, for minority-owned businesses and then often other overlooked groups. Senator Cardin, you and I usually discuss foreign policy, national security. Now we're going to discuss business. It's a real pleasure to see you. And I don't know if you heard any. I love these stories of people who have, in this horrible time, and we have to understand not everybody's been able to pivot. So I want to nod that way. But I also, whether in Chestertown, Maryland, where I'm from, I've seen so many small businesses that have pivoted in new directions and really made it. But as you're coming into your new role, what do you think the missing gaps are there where the government can be of assistance in this time of continued stress?
Well, first, it's good to be with you. And you really pointed out why we have to pay attention to this. Small businesses figure out a better way to get things done. During COVID-19, we've seen the creativity of small businesses in order to survive. They've figured out better ways to do things and to adjust to COVID-19. And they've done miraculous ways of keeping their customer base. They also create jobs, as we know. About half the jobs in America are with small companies. but they don't have resiliency during a downturn in the economy. They don't have the access to deep pockets. They don't have the technical support to go through all the mazes you have to go through in order to get help. So that's why we had to pay special attention to small businesses. And what we did, starting with primarily the CARES Act, providing the help under the Paycheck Protection Program and under the EIDL program, loan forgiveness program, was to provide that safety net to small businesses so they could survive during this pandemic. And it has worked. We were able to save a lot of small businesses that would otherwise have failed. The challenge today is the pandemic's still with us, so we still need to pay attention to this. And those small businesses that depend upon large gatherings have really been decimated by COVID-19. So we got to pay attention to these issues.
You know, earlier in today's program, I interviewed the new ranking member of the House Small Business Committee, Blaine Luetkemeyer. And I asked him, I said, what does your gut tell you as you're talking to your constituents in Missouri, you know, small businesses? Do you feel we're mostly through this? I know it's a non-scientific question, but how do you feel? Do you feel we're through the worst part of the COVID impacts and beginning to come out of it? Or do you think we're going to be in for a dark period still ahead?
Well, I think it really depends on the business that you have. If you are a restaurant that depends upon customers eating in the restaurant, you're still hurting and you don't see yet the light at the end of this tunnel. So it really depends upon the type of operation that you're running. And that's why this most recent round of relief is really targeted to those small businesses that have had a dramatic reduction in their revenue from pre-COVID to now, and to make sure that we pay attention to those businesses in underserved, underbanked communities, minority small businesses. So it really depends on where you are. We're certainly not at the end of the recession. Everything that we've heard from the economists indicate that we must be bold in the help to our economy. That's why the first important thing for a small business owner is get COVID-19 behind us, get the virus under control. The second thing is get our economy back on track. Because if families don't have money to spend, they're not going to patronize any business, particularly small businesses. So we have to pay attention to the virus, and we got to pay attention to the economy. President Biden's plan does both of those. He puts significant resources in getting this vaccine distributed and money in the hands of people who are unemployed and American families. That's important for small businesses, in addition to the direct help for those that have had the worst impact from COVID-19.
You and I, you know, particularly in the national security space, when we've discussed this in the past, understand that players out there, whether they're nations or whether they're businesses, what they most need and want is predictability. And I guess my question to you is, when you've kind of looked at what, you know, without, you know, commenting negatively or positively, there was a certain equilibrium during the Trump administration on regulation and taxes. Now we're seeing, through a very quick set of executive orders, the rules and scaffolding and the laws and regulations of that change very rapidly. Are there unintended consequences that could be problematic in achieving, you know, predictability for the small business community as the Biden administration comes in to undo a lot of what the Trump administration did?
Your point is very well taken. When we see changes made on a either executive basis without bringing in the Congress or on a partisan basis, it may not last for very long. And that's certainly what President Trump did when he was president, with the use of the executive orders and what he did in regards to forcing legislation, particularly on the tax code, through the Congress of the United States. There will be a reaction now that the Democrats control the Congress and Joe Biden is president. There's going to be an adjustment. But the more we can do bipartisan, the better it is, not just for the policies we enact, but for the staying power of those policies. So yes, I agree with what President Biden is doing in regards to some of our immigration policies. It's what America's about. It's our values. I thought President Trump was totally wrong on the immigration. But it would be far better if Congress could pass comprehensive immigration reform so that we know that this won't change again if the administration changes.
You've mentioned issues of minority businesses, businesses that have been underserved out there. We live in a time where there's been a lot of racial strife. We're trying to sort of look at, okay, what do you dismantle? I had the CEO of the Black Chambers of Commerce on a moment ago talking about this. What do you dismantle from the past to try to get right in the future? And I know you have a lot of legislation in that area, but how are you and your allies in Congress trying to sort of fix some of our tensions on that front?
It's a great question. I'm introducing two bills today with my colleagues, one dealing with emerging markets to make it easier for minority small businesses and those in underserved communities to be able to get access to capital in emerging markets. The other, called the Uplift, deals with innovation economy and making it clear that we want minority businesses in underserved communities to be able to get access to incubator programs and programs that can get them started, working in conjunction with minority institutions. So we do have to recognize that there is, when we look at the wealth gap in America, part of that is because we haven't had equal opportunity. And when you look at the tools currently available under the Small Business Administration, we need to do a better job in reaching the underserved communities, low-income communities, rural America, minority businesses, women-owned businesses. These are all areas that we have to pay additional attention. Fortunately, we have tools in place. They need to be supported, they have to be resourced, and we have to strengthen these tools. And that's one of the things we're looking at doing during this Congress.
We're taking questions from the audience. Senator, we have a question for you from Drew. Drew?
Hi, this is Drew Camp, President and CEO of the Council Bluffs Area Chamber of Commerce in Council Bluffs, Iowa. And my question is, if a business does not qualify for the new round of PPP, an EIDL loan advance, or shuttered venue operator grant, what are the best resources for them to utilize to receive the assistance they need? Thanks for the opportunity.
Drew knows this world well. Thank you. Senator?
Well, there's existing tools under the Small Business Administration you should take a look at, the 7A program, the 504 program. We have resource partners who can help you access the help that you may need. So there's a variety of menu programs that are available. So if you don't qualify because your revenue loss wasn't great enough for the next round of PPP, or for whatever reasons you're not qualified for the EIDL grant programs that have been enhanced, or the loan program, there are other programs that are available. You might have an existing loan with the SBA. We have a loan forgiveness program that's out there. So what I would urge you to do is to get with your help from your community, that from your small business office that's located there, to see how they can help you get through this COVID-19 pandemic.
Senator, I'm going to ask you an unfair question as we wrap up. I've mentioned that I have a house out in Chestertown, Maryland, and so my buddy is an oyster farmer at Orchard Point Oysters, or the Chester River Wine and Cheese Shop, or there's a Casa Carmen Wine. There are all these little places that are struggling and trying to figure out how they do it. And I've been shocked at how they're so much more innovative than I am. And so, but I used to ask Steve Chabot, when I would talk to, the Republican from Ohio, does he have any favorite businesses to go to? Does he go talk to folks? So do you get out in your small business role and actually meet businesses? Does somebody come out and, say, well, this is my small business innovator of the day?
Oh, absolutely. Chestertown's a beautiful area, a great city. I love it dearly. You're in one of the nicest spots. You don't want to name your favorite child, so I won't name my favorite city in Maryland. But Chestertown is a special place. And the small business, it depends upon small businesses. And they are very innovative. So yes, I do get around. My wife, Myrna, and I patronize small businesses. We do that regularly. We've done it during this COVID-19, particularly with our carryout service and with our what we were buying. We tried to patronize as many small businesses as we possibly can. And yes, I do talk with them. I solicit their comments, and many times they're very free in offering their view of what we need to do as a nation. It was interesting. We recognized that in COVID-19, we all had to help each other. And there were a lot of people who are always reluctant to ask the government to help them, but they needed help during COVID-19. And they were proud of the programs we brought forward. It kept them alive. And they're going to see, they're going to be around after the COVID-19 is gone, and they're going to grow, and they're going to help our country grow and our economy grow. It really is the spirit of America that we see in small businesses. One last point. My grandfather was an immigrant, came to this country and started a small store. That small store became a large company, and that's the American way. He found a better way to do his business. He was able to grow, create jobs, and help create this great economy. That's what America depends upon, and that's why I'm proud to lead the Small Business and Entrepreneurship Committee in the United States Senate.
Well, Senator Ben Cardin, I'll tell you, if you ever want to discuss NATO and Europe or Asia, on the side of your new role, feel free to give me a call anytime. I can still do that. But congratulations, incoming chair of the Senate Small Business and Entrepreneurship Committee, Senator Ben Cardin. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Great to be with you. Thank you.
That brings us to the end of our program. A big thank you to Wells Fargo and all of you attendees for joining us for this discussion. If you missed any of the conversations, we'll have the video up from the event on our website shortly. We'll be back at 1:15 p.m. Eastern today for a virtual summit on the coronavirus vaccine, the challenge of our times. You won't want to miss. We're going to be joined by Dr. Anthony Fauci, the National Institute's Francis Collins, the big boss, members of Congress, and many key players involved in the manufacture and distribution of the COVID vaccine. You won't want to miss this. Until then, I'm Steve Clemons. Be well and see you soon.